I've rewatched this show more times than I'd care to admit, and every single time, one little racket grabs me by the collar. The calling cards. Tony and the crew, selling cheap phone cards to immigrants on a street corner. On paper, it barely made a dime, but I'd put money on it being the smartest thing Tony Soprano ever pulled. And I'm convinced the scene that finally explains how it works is the exact moment, somewhere deep in his gut, that Tony figures out his best friend is wearing a wire. So let me make my case. Here's what I love about Tony's empire, and also what kind of bores me about most of it. So much of what he ran was just old, handed down. The construction skimming, the bid rigging, the union kickbacks. The Esplanade job was a genuine cash cow, but honestly, every move on it had already been run by somebody's grandfather. Protection rackets, card games, swag off the docks, the bookmaking out the back of some bar, satriales, the bust outs. Tony inherited most of it from Johnny's era, and it mostly ran on autopilot. There's no imagination in any of it. Then you've got the flashier plays, Wabistics, the fake tech stock, the HUD housing fraud. Those at least felt like they belonged to a new century. And I'll come back to them, because I've got a bone to pick with those too. But somewhere in season 2, tucked away as a little B-plot you might forget by the finale, the crew runs something that always struck me as genuinely alive. It's small, it's clean, and there's almost nothing that can come back to bite them. And of everything in the whole series, it's the one that actually saw where the world was heading.
Is some telephone calling card scam.
The telephone calling cards. So that's what I want to work out with you today. Across 6 seasons, all those schemes, which one was really the smartest thing Tony ever put his hands on? Stick with me, because for me, the answer runs straight through the saddest death in the show. To get why it's so clever, you have to remember the world it lived in. This is right around the year 2000. Hardly anybody's walking around with a phone in their pocket yet. There's no WhatsApp, no FaceTime, no calling somebody overseas for free over the internet. So if you're an immigrant living in Jersey and your whole family is on another continent, staying in touch is brutally expensive. Long distance costs a fortune. International rates could run you a few dollars a minute. One long call home could set you back a couple $100. And that ache, that need to just hear your mother's voice, that's the whole engine of this thing. It makes me a little sick, honestly, when I sit with it too long. Here's how they ran it. You find yourself a front man, some poor sap willing to put his name and his credit on the line. You use him to set up a shell company.
You're now in the business of selling prepaid calling cards.
Tony's crew literally called theirs Acme telephone card. Then you go to a phone carrier and buy an enormous block of calling time, millions of minutes, all on credit, promising to pay at the end of the month. You print your cards and you push them out onto the streets cheap. Usually through some guy with a sandwich board who has no idea the mob is behind any of it. People buy them up in a heartbeat, because when a card promises you 7 cents a minute to call home, that card is a lifeline. And then you simply never pay the carrier. The bill comes, you let it sit. Eventually, the phone company works out they're getting stiffed, and they kill every card. And all those minutes people paid for just die in their hands. By then, you're long gone. The cards are all sold, the cash is counted, and you're already lining up the next front man to do the whole thing over again. Now, I know exactly how this sounds. A few bucks a card. Who cares, right? For years, I wrote it off myself. I figured it was small potatoes, beneath a boss like Tony. But the longer I sat with it, the more I came around to thinking it might be the most efficient crime in the entire show. And it all comes down to who's getting hurt. Think about the victims for a second. These are immigrant families. A lot of them people who half knew the card was a little dodgy when they bought it. So when it dies on them, are they marching down to the police station over $5? Almost never. Plenty of them don't trust the cops to begin with, or they figure, and they're right, that nobody with a badge is going to lose a wink of sleep over a dead phone card sold to a foreigner. That's the ugly genius of it. They picked victims who couldn't fight back and wouldn't be believed if they tried. And say one of them did complain. Where does the trail even go? The man who sold it is some random hustler on a corner who wouldn't know Tony Soprano from Adam. There's no store, no real company, no phone number to call. Everything just evaporates. It reminds me so much of what they did to Davey Scatino. Same cold logic. You strip out everything of value, you sell it fast for cash, and you leave the people you owe holding a bag full of nothing. By the time the creditors turn up, the shelves are bare, and you've walked away whistling. The calling cards run on that exact same engine, and yet there's no burned out store, no ruined friend standing in the wreckage pointing a finger at you. And here's a detail that genuinely got under my skin. This wasn't dreamed up for television. Prepaid calling card fraud was a real racket, and it really did prey on immigrant communities in exactly this era. Real people, just trying to call home, getting fleeced for it. The writers didn't invent it. They held a mirror up to something that was already out there, quietly working the same folks. So let me actually stack it up against the competition, because I've been arguing about this one with people for years. Take Wabistics, the stock pump and dump that Christopher ran for the family. On the surface, it looks modern, forward-thinking. But it drives me a little crazy every single time, because they spun it up in season 2 right after Uncle Junior and Larry Boy Baris got hit with an indictment built on stock fraud and, I promise you I'm not making this up, a calling card scam. Tony wasn't even named in that case. And what does he do with that gift? He turns right around and runs both of those exact crimes himself. There's no vision in that. It's just ego. A guy so hungry to prove he's smarter than his uncle that he can't see the cliff he's walking off. Then there's Esplanade.
The Esplanade.
The big construction money. It's a serious earner, I'll give it that. But there's nothing new under the sun there. Skim the materials, rig the bids, lean on the union. A wise guy from 1930 would recognize every play in the book. Loads of money and not a shred of imagination. Then we've got HUD, the housing scam that Brian, Carmela's cousin, the family's financial guy, brings to Tony. You buy up cheap houses through a front man, run them through a phony nonprofit, cook the appraisals, then rip the copper out of the walls, and stroll off while the government eats the guaranteed loan. I'll admit that one actually has some real vision to it, and I'd probably hand it second place. But it's got two problems I can't get past. For one, the whole thing came from Brian in the first place. Tony only vaguely remembered reading about it in the paper before Brian laid it all out for him. And for another, it just doesn't scale. Pull it too many times in one neighborhood, and HUD itself starts sniffing around. There's a hard ceiling on it. And then there's the picnic coolers from the Scatino bust out, which, I'll be honest, make me laugh out loud. You've got Richie Aprile pumping the guys up to move these things on the street for $2 or $3 a piece, and Tony standing right there, openly irritated at how much sweat it takes to earn so little. It's small, and it's dumb, and it's all effort for pocket change. Richie wanted so badly to be feared, and the poor man could barely turn a profit. I have to take a quick detour here, because it's too good to leave out, and it's about little Carmine, who I'm more and more convinced was quietly the smartest operator in the whole show. While everybody up in New York is knifing each other over the top job, Carmine's parked down in Miami, running businesses that are mostly legal, film production, the mainstream stuff in the porn, disco clubs, even fixing wet t-shirt contests. Low overhead, a long way from the FBI, and he strolls out the far end of the series as maybe the only guy who gets anything close to a happy ending. The catch, for our purposes, is that Carmine's whole game is basically legit, and we're here ranking crimes. So as a crime, with everything on the table, I still can't find one sharper than the cards. Which brings me to the real reason I can't let this scam go. This is the part that breaks my heart a little every time. It's in Funhouse, the season 2 finale. Tony, Pussy, Furio, Silvio, all winding down together after a good day. And Furio, who's still pretty new to all of it, asks how this calling card thing actually works. And Pussy tells him the whole thing, start to finish, every step, out loud, in the middle of a restaurant, in plain English. No code, no this guy, no that thing, just a clean, complete, guided tour of how to commit a federal crime. And the camera holds on Tony, just watching him think. I still remember the first time this really landed for me, because guys like this, they spend their whole lives talking in half sentences and euphemisms. They never, ever lay it out clean like that. So why on earth would a made man suddenly narrate an entire scam start to finish, right out in the open, like he's reading off a brochure? The answer I keep landing on is the one that hurts. That flawless little speech was a man reciting his lines for the FBI, and I think Tony felt it in his stomach a long time before his head would let him say the words. Because by season 2, Pussy really is an informant, and he really is wired. And Tony loves this man like a brother, so he spent an entire season refusing to see it. But there's something about the sheer fearlessness of that explanation, laying a crime bare, in full, in public, with no worry at all about being overheard, that only makes sense coming from a man for whom being overheard had quietly become the whole job. And I think, sitting there watching, some buried part of Tony finally does the math. Look at what the show gives us right after. Tony goes home, eats some bad shellfish, and tumbles into that long, feverish run of dreams. The ones where he finally admits it to himself, out loud, that Pussy's a rat. And then comes the boat. When Tony finally confronts him out on the water, Pussy crumbles. He confesses he's been flipped for about a year and a half, ever since a heroin bust that would have put him away for the rest of his life. He swears up and down that what he handed over amounted to nothing. But listen to what he actually names while he's begging for his life. Wabistics. And most of all, the Scatino bust out. The family's own business walked straight to the feds. And here's the thing that gets me. Pussy never even has to confess the calling cards for the calling cards to be the thing that doomed him. That perfect little tutorial he gave Furio was the tell all along. The sound of a man who'd spent 18 months quietly narrating this family's every move to the government, doing it now on pure reflex because it had become second nature to him. The smartest scam Tony ever ran turned out to be the loose thread. Pussy tugged it at a dinner table without even meaning to, and the whole thing came apart, and it ended with him in the water. I've watched that ending a dozen times, and it still lands on me like a punch. So that's my case. For my money, the calling cards are the smartest crime in the whole series. Low risk, damn near untraceable, and years ahead of the world they were quietly robbing. A scam so small and so quiet that it doubled as the murder weapon for Tony's oldest friend. That's the combination I can never shake. Now I really want to hear from you, because I already know some of you are typing. Line them all up for me. Esplanade, HUD, Wabistics, the Scatino bust out, the calling cards. And tell me which one you think was actually Tony's masterpiece. And be straight with me. Do you buy that Funhouse dinner as the moment he knew about Pussy? Or do you think he'd known all along and just couldn't face it? Drop your ranking down below and make your case. I'll be in the comments arguing right back.